Hey guys, I wanted to come today to talk to you about the tourism system. Some of you have taken a tourism course before, but many of you have not. So I wanted to make sure that we would cover a few bases before we continue with tourism management concepts. All right, first thing that you need to know about tourism is the definition of a tourist, or the definition of tourism. If you Google the word tourist, you will see a very large variety of definitions. So for the purpose of this class, we will focus on the definition offered by the World Tourism Organization. If you want to go on their website, it's unwto.org. So there are three parts in this definition. The first one is that the person has to go outside of his or her natural environment. The second part is that it has to be less than a year, and the last part is focused on the purpose of the trip. It has to be something other than work that you're getting paid for. So these are the three components of the definition. This classification will actually give you a better visual of who is considered a tourist, who is not considered a tourist. So if you look at a resident who is not traveling, then we're clear on that. But then the resident who is traveling, either you are a tourist or you are a traveler. You can be a domestic tourist or you can be an international tourist. You don't have to go abroad to be considered a tourist. Now, looking at the purpose of a travel, you can travel for business, to visit family and friends, and that's what most of the tourists do. Most tourism activities are done for leisure. We look at that in this graph here. Leisure, recreation, and holidays constitute 53% of the purpose of traveling back in 2014. These are figures offered by the World Tourism Organization. Then visiting relatives and friends, health, religion, and then business, and then not specified motives for travel. So tourism is seen as a system because as the world's largest industry, it is complex because it includes a variety of other industries. From your departing point to your destination point, you will get into contact with a variety of industries, from transportation to food to entertainment, recreation, food and beverage. So there are a lot of different industries, accommodation as well, that are included in tourism as a system. So it's not just a simple going from a destination from point A to point B, but during that exchange or during that transition, there are a variety of activities involved. This is another way of seeing it, from consumer to origin area of the consumer to the destination. The consumer is getting in contact with accommodation, with air, with like I said, entertainment, dealing with agencies or not, so on and so forth. So this is just to give you an idea of how complex the industry is. Let's look at some stats here. And one important one that you need to remember is that 1 out of 11 jobs in the world are related to tourism. Tourism constitutes 10% of the world GDP. Okay, so these are pretty impressive numbers. Let's look at some other numbers. In terms of ITA and ITR, international tourist arrivals, that means the number of tourists, the number of people who travel to a destination. International tourist receipts, that means the amount of money generated by tourism, the amount of money that a country or a region will receive as a result of tourism activities. So back in 2014, Europe was number 1 in both categories, meaning that as a region, Europe would receive the largest number of tourists and the largest amount of money from tourism. Most tourists use air to travel, then road, rail, and water. or water and rail. Like I said earlier, as a region, Europe #1 in terms of tourist arrival. So why is the United States here #2? Because this table is looking at countries. So in terms of countries, France is #1. France receives the highest number of tourists in the world. The United States are the second largest receivers of tourists. Then Spain, China, and Italy. Now let's look at the money. So most of the money in terms of country is going to the United States. Then Spain, then China, then France. Again, as a region, Europe is #1. But in terms of countries, United States #1, Spain #2, China #3. Now let's look at where these tourists are coming from. Okay, this graph is to look at where they are coming from. An interesting fact that you have to remember is that most tourists will travel within their region, meaning most Americans will travel within the Americas, meaning Canada, Mexico, the US, so on and so forth. Most Europeans will travel within Europe. Most Asian and Pacific residents will travel within Asia and Pacific. Okay, so Europe is #1 in terms of international tourist arrival by region, in terms of origin. So most Europeans travel within Europe. Most Asians travel within Asia. And Asia is #2 here because if you look at China in terms of numbers and how much that represents in terms of not only money, but in terms of number of tourists, that's a huge number. So that's why Asia is #2 here. Now, let's look at the money spent. Who spends the most money? And again, with that argument of China being a country with a very large population, China is #1 in terms of expenditures. Chinese tourists spend the most money, then Americans, then Germans. Now, this is not to depress you, but it's just to face the fact that in America, employers are not required by law to offer paid vacations to their employees. In comparison, look at the United Kingdom, look at France, look at Greece, where employees have to offer an average or minimum, actually, of 25 days in France. In Greece, to their employees, 28 days minimum. That's why when you go to Europe in the summer, most people have taken the month of August off. Okay, because they have so many days off and they take advantage of those days off. But in the US, we not only get a very low number of paid vacation, but we also tend not to take these vacations, and we tend to work a lot more than other nationalities. So now that we've looked at the stats and the data, why do people engage in tourism? Why do people travel? There are different ways to look at it, different theories, different strategies. Let's look at the first one here offered by Pierce. Pierce looked at it from the perspective of the tourist having motives to go somewhere, and based on the destination and what the destination has to offer and the destination's image that one has, mix that with the experience at the destination that will lead to certain outcomes. Example, you as a tourist, you have a personality. You have certain demographics. Maybe you grew up in an environment where people spoke different languages. Maybe you are maybe you grew up in a military family, so you traveled a lot as a kid. So all these will create certain motives on your side. Now look at the destination. Maybe France, for example. France has a set of facilities, infrastructures, activities that you can do. These can be very attractive to tourists. So this will determine your choice. Then your experience there, shaped by social, cultural, political and environmental factors that will shape your experience there. When you went to France, were there a lot of demonstrations and strikes, for example? Was the food good? Were you well received? The outcomes might be satisfactory or they might not be. What kind of impact did your visit cost or did your visit have on the hosts? Okay, this is one way of looking at the motivations. Another way is looking at the economic determinants. For example, the cost of living. Are you going to a place where the cost of living is lower than in the US? How far will your dollar go? Are you going to a place where, excuse me, we just spoke about that, sorry, paid vacation. These are your own social and psychological determinant. Do you have a lot of paid vacation in the first place? What is your attitude about the destination? What is your attitude about Europe? Are you attracted to Europe as a whole, as a continent, or not really? How do you perceive a destination? How do you perceive Asia or Africa? That will motivate you to go or not. And other factors such as political and social environment. Are you going to an area where it's politically stable? War, terrorism, are there threats there? How about the level of internet access? Will you be able to have access to internet as if you were at home? This one you're, I'm sure, very familiar with, Maslow's hierarchy of individual needs. Tourism will stand all the way up to at the level of self-actualization. Tourism is not a basic need. Travel may be a basic need in the context of, for example, a refugee having to travel somewhere in order to get food, water, rest, and shelter. Okay, that will be considered travel, but not tourism. Now, another way of looking at the type of tourists and why tourists travel is Plug psychographic traveler's type. On the one hand, he has the allocentric traveler, who is the spontaneous, adventurous type of traveler. We all have that person in our circle, the person who wants to go to the Amazon and zip line there, or, do something adventurous. On the other hand, on the opposite side, you have the psychocentric traveler who is more comfortable going to a place that is very familiar, that is very similar to their place of origin. Maybe that will be the person who doesn't want to go abroad, or the person who wants to go to a place where they can find all the Starbucks, the McDonald's, and the subways, and things that they're very familiar with. And in the middle, you have the mid-centric people who want to go to places are not very familiar with, but still a little comfortable. For example, where they speak the same language. Okay, so everybody will fall in a certain category depending on the destination and what the destination, how they consider that destination. For example, a person will consider Hawaii being an allocentric type of destination, very adventurous. But for some other people who like to just chill on the beach and sip on pina coladas, they might consider Hawaii as a very psychocentric destination, as a very comfortable destination. So it depends on what you will do there. Again, another way of looking at motivations, social pressures. What kind of information do you have? What kind of needs do you have? Okay, your preferences, your goals. What is the goal, the purpose of your trip? Those will determine your motivations. So now, looking at your own project and looking at your own experiences, what are some of the needs and problems that you can identify? And based on that, what type of solution can you provide? And this is how your project needs to be. You need to start with a need, a problem, and then provide a solution. Instead of just starting with something cool that you think would be of interest to people, start with what do we need? What is the problem? What do tourists need? What did you need during your last trip? And then provide that solution. All right, I will see you on the other side. Thank you.